ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
G'day, Matt Bevan here from If You're Listening. Your ABC News Daily episode will start in a sec. But first, it's 2025 and the world is, well...
increased Russian military activity around key undersea cables.
There's a huge plume of smoke.
Look what happened. Is this crazy?
That's going to take some explaining. My podcast, If You're Listening, makes sense of world news one story at a time. Find it now on ABC Listen.
The caravan was carrying enough explosives to cause mass casualties if detonated. So why did police keep its discovery secret for 10 days? And didn't at least the Jewish community, the target according to a note inside the van, deserve to know far sooner? Today, terrorism expert Greg Barton on what we know so far about the case and if anything can be done now to stop the rise in anti-Semitism. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily.
Another threat to the Australian Jewish community. A caravan laden with explosives found on a rural property in Dural in Sydney's northwest.
The explosives were believed to have been obtained from a mining site and had a blast zone radius of 40 metres in diameter.
The full resources of the state of New South Wales and New South Wales Police have been deployed. I want to make it absolutely clear that anyone attempting terrorism, violence, hatred in our community will be met with the full force of the law. There are massive amounts of...
Greg, let's start with what we know about this case. This caravan, it was found on January the 19th, full of explosives, power gel explosives that police say are almost exclusively used in the mining industry. What does that tell us, if anything?
That's a really big bit of data for us. It tells us that whoever's involved in this likely has links with organised crime or that sort of capacity. I don't think petty criminals and activists who might resort to violence would be able to get hold of mining explosives like this. In mining operations, you need explosives that are very powerful but also very dense because you're often drilling holes in rock, and so you need the maximum charge from the smallest volume. You need them to be stable to work with and easy to set up and detonate. That makes them perfect for political violence, for terrorism. These sort of plastic explosives are similar to what the military uses. So with all those things in mind, and given the history of the last 25 years, you can understand that such material is highly secured. I mean, you know, mining sites have multiple layers of security. The supply chains have multiple layers of security. It's just not easy to get hold of because it would be dangerous if it was. And it's rare. I can't think of any other occasions in Australia where we've had reports of this sort of material being found at large and apparently in the hands of people with nefarious intent.
Wow, okay. And police say it could have caused a mass casualty event.
I can say the amount of explosives is very real, and we need to take every threat at its absolute highest in this current environment.
It's not clear how much of this power gel explosive that companies like Orica use, but depending on the volume, and the report suggests it was a significant volume, this is enough to bring down a building. Wow. So, you know, if it was a vehicle as a vehicle bomb, if the vehicle itself was being used, and you know, parked in the front of a building, perhaps under an overhang, it could bring down the face of a building.
Wow. Okay, so the New South Wales Police Deputy Commissioner Dave Hudson, yes, he said it could create a blast zone with a 40-metre diameter, so very significant. So this caravan was found on the side of a road in Dural, which is a semi-rural suburb about 40 kilometres northwest of Sydney. It had been parked there for more than a month. That's a long time.
It is a long time, and we don't know whether it was all that time, you know, these explosives were in it. You'd assume that was the case. That sounds like somebody was in the midst of doing something and was interrupted. Perhaps they felt that they were under surveillance, perhaps they were under surveillance, and they froze and just left the caravan where it was. You'd have to assume the intention when it was parked was for it to be parked for a brief period of time before being taken on to where it was going to be used. I mean, it's also possible, Sam, that this whole thing is a setup. I mean, it's deadly serious, but it's almost like in a Hollywood film. So, that suggests that somebody was sending a message. I think that's unlikely because of the explosives present. I mean, you wouldn't go to so much trouble securing this explosive to then use it just to send a message.
Yeah, police are investigating that idea that it could have just been a setup. So that is one line of investigation. Of course, there was a note found in the van, according to police, and some Jewish sites were listed on that note. So that is incredibly worrying for the Jewish community.
It certainly is. If we take those notes at face value, if it's not some sort of elaborate piece of theatre, which seems unlikely, then they were possibly very close to a mass casualty event targeting a Jewish site. So we've had synagogues hit with arson attacks. Fortunately, no lives lost, but that perhaps was partly a matter of luck because it could easily have people who've been at an early prayer service and caught in a fire. This is another whole level again. We're stepping up, and so it's chilling, and you can understand the Jewish community just in fear.
Should we see it as a terrorist incident? Chris Minns, the New South Wales Premier, and the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, they have both labelled it that. Is that how we should consider it, though?
From a police point of view, the operational decision is whether you press the button and go ahead with a counter-terrorism investigation or not. It can't be done lightly, but once you do it, if you have good reason for doing so, it unleashes a lot of resources. It means that state police, New South Wales Police, work with AFP, with ASIO, if necessary, with ASIS, with other agencies. You can put a lot more people working on a case than a normal investigation will be possible. We're told that there's 100 counter-terrorism police working on this case. We don't know whether something is terrorism until the investigation is done. If terrorism is involved, it's the use of violence or the threatened use of violence to bring about some sort of political change. And obviously we hope with terrorism plots that they're detected and they're interrupted. So then when you go to court, you're trying to prove intent and say this is what they would have done if they could have done it. And that's a whole world of trouble from a court case. So we can't say definitively what this is. One of the reasons for hesitating to say that it certainly is terrorism, because we need to let the investigation run its course, is because there's now another possibility.
It's a disturbing warning from the Australian Federal Police. Commissioner Rhys Kershaw revealing overseas actors might be funding some of the anti-Semitic attacks happening here in Australia.
We believe criminals for hire may be behind some incidents.
We could even have foreign states. The obvious possibility is an involvement with Russia, because we know that Russia has been involved in active campaigns to disrupt Western democratic societies and undermine faith in Western democracy. So that's a possibility.
Although, of course, police and ASIO are giving us very limited information when it comes to...
Yes, we're speculating, of course, yeah.
Well, that's exactly. We are speculating, and we don't know for sure what is going on here at this point. We do know the owner of the caravan was already in police custody for other unrelated offences. The New South Wales Police Commissioner, Karen Webb, actually confirmed that.
Not only is the caravan been removed and the contents removed from harm from the public, but also the owner is out of play and in custody. So the risk to the public has been mitigated very early on.
And of course, Greg, the really concerning thing as well was, just as this case was coming to light, there was more graffiti attacks on a Jewish school in Sydney's eastern suburbs. So it's like there's no stopping this anti-Semitic activity.
Yeah, it comes in the context of rising anti-Semitism around the world, a lot of emotion around what's happening in Israel, Gaza, West Bank, lots of different people caught up in that. Jewish community still traumatised because of the October 7th, 2023 Hamas attacks, still waiting for hostages to be released from Gaza. There's a lot of reasons for lots of people to be very emotional and very concerned. Some of those people may resort to violence. It has to be said that the protests in Australia have remarkably consistently been non-violent, but we certainly have seen rising anti-Semitism and some nasty attacks. I think it's possible we've got multiple actors with multiple motivations, some acting out of concern, they think, for the Palestinian situation, some acting out of a neo-Nazi hatred of Jews, anti-Semitism, some possibly acting out of a for-profit criminal activity because of people paying them to engage in activities which will undermine faith in Australian democracy. So I think all of those three things are likely. We won't know really until we're told more by police about who they've arrested and who they're investigating. It's ongoing operations, so that's understandable. We don't have that information. But certainly the Jewish community needs to be kept as safe as possible, and we need to work to maintain our social cohesion, which, despite this terrible news, remains more intact than naysayers would say. We're not seeing a groundswell of violence. We're seeing small elements, but it is disturbing.
Well, Greg, we know police kept the discovery of this caravan secret, hidden from the wider public for about 10 days. It was only revealed because the information was leaked to the Daily Telegraph. Now, the Jewish community is not happy about that. Peter Wertheim, he's the co-chief executive officer of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, says they had a right to know.
There's a lot of jitteriness out there, and it's not just in the Jewish community. I think it's becoming more widespread now, and it's important for people to be kept in the picture.
Is it normal for police to keep something of this magnitude from the public for that long?
Yeah, if this is an unusual case all around, Sam, the first thing about police operations, when you're investigating something, you think you've got an interrupted attack of some kind, is you want to keep quiet about what you know, not reveal your hand, your intelligence, so that you can monitor communication channels, individuals, networks, and try and get a sense of what they're doing in panic. Of course, once it becomes public, you're onto this case, then you lose the advantage of surprise. Peter Wertheim is a very respected Jewish community leader, very sensible. I think what Peter's proposing was not that the police went public, but that they discreetly told some leaders from the Jewish community with the understanding it would be kept secret for operational reasons. Police probably looked at that and decided not to do that because of concerns that the news would get out. But I can understand Peter's position. I can understand the police position. It is unfortunate the news has got out publicly like this. Hopefully enough time has elapsed since the caravan was discovered. The police were able to use the element of surprise and monitor people they think may be involved. But it's not good that it gets out like this.
Deputy Police Commissioner David Hudson does say that, in fact, he thinks the case has been compromised because of this. So that is concerning from a policing perspective, I suppose. Let's consider then, Greg, whether this rise in anti-Semitism in Australia could have been in some way prevented. Is there someone to blame for this?
Well, that's a good question, and thinking about who would ask that question politically, we're heading up to a federal election.
Should we act surprised that this has escalated now to an attempted terrorist attack? No, we shouldn't. And the Prime Minister needs to show national leadership here to deal with the national crisis, and so far there's been no sign of it.
This is a time for unity and for the country to come together, not a time to look for political partisanship or to make political points. I don't intend to do so.
Unfortunately, we've had, despite the fact we've had a long and proud history in Australia of bipartisan support for security matters, for fighting against anti-Semitism and other kinds of hate, that's at danger at the moment, that bipartisan spirit, in this being used opportunistically for point scoring to, sort of make the government look weaker in the head up to the election. It's sort of understandable politically, but it's a pity that something as serious as this is being drawn into that. We'll have to see whether the government could have done more earlier, and I think it's reasonable for people to make that criticism, but we just don't know. So this is not to say that these serious accusations shouldn't be treated seriously, but there's a lot of politics involved. Politics in Israel, politics in Australia, and politics around the world.
Yeah. So do you think it can be brought under control then, Greg, or could this actually escalate further from this point?
I think given what we've just heard about this caravan packed with extremely potent explosives that are normally kept in very secure sites, with the potential of it, had it gone ahead and be used in a plot mass casualty event, I think we have to say that we're constantly waking up to unpleasant surprises about how serious this is, and to pretend otherwise would be negligent.
Greg Barton is an expert in counter-terrorism and a professor of global Islamic politics and security studies at Deakin University. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed and Cara Jensen-McKinnon. Audio production by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. ABC News Daily will be back again on Monday. Thanks for listening.